Hmm. Feeling at ease and sort of a trust in things that things will be okay. Things that learn to know that it already exists. Kind of the theme for this upcoming thing about what planet we're going to be talking about. I don't know if you heard that. I'm whispering like ASMR. Speaking of ASMR, that's sort of the theme. It's related to what we're going to talk about. Anyways, so Venus is all about pleasure. Well, not all about pleasure, but things that we find are like what's what's worth doing, what gives us pleasure. So that's what's worth doing, right? And what's worth doing is often pleasing, of course. Like right now, I'm making some food. This is more the placements. I'll explain it a bit. So Venus is what we find worth doing, what we value in life, what we consider things that possessions as well. Leisure. I would say leisure. Yeah, I would say leisure. Things that are like so resting. Like cooking in this case isn't resting. Some people don't like this. So it's basically like it's work. And some people don't like that. Now it depends on your placement, of course, in Venus. Depends on which pleases you. That's the word Venus. Always something falling in this house. That's one of my Venus, and I have Venus in Virgo, which is a fall placement, meaning that because Venus is exalted, or it's in rise when it's in Pisces, but we'll get to that in a second. So things that we do for for fun. That's more about the sun, sun. So Venus in Aries are people who enjoy. Oh, by the way, Venus, as I mentioned before, if you saw my post on Mars, so Venus is kind of like the opposite of Mars. Right? Mars also rules Scorpio, just as it does Aries. So much about moving, aggression, all those things. Venus is the opposite. It's a sort of a feminine energy. It's more, of course, Venus. Right? You know that song, I'm your Venus, I'm your fire, your desire. So that's the earthly based on Venus. You could say that, the blessings of Venus is that it provides you, it helps you appreciate things that you would otherwise probably take for granted. Appreciation. That's the word esteem. That's a Venusian thing. So Venus in Aries it's actually it's in its detriment. What that means is it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just that Venus and Venus and Aries people, my father, for example, tend to relate to. It's also the urge to relate. That's why it's also a secondary ruler. For me, it's a secondary ruler of Libra, a primary ruler for Taurus, pleasure, right? But because it's also relate, it doesn't necessarily mean like relationships like people, but it's also what we relate to, the things outside of us. That's why it's also possessions of things. So very earthly sort of energy that Venus has. So Venus and Aries people tend to relate to people in a very like passionate way. They tend to like hanging out with people or doing things that drives their curiosity, that drives their that initiative to go out there, to go be, to just like what's this new thing? What's this? Aries is always about new things. First, Aries, just like in the first house, it's new ventures, new things, new plans, new things that you do, new things, new. That's, yeah, kind of opposite of Capricorn, or rather, Cancer, old things, right? So, Venus in Aries is like that. Venus in Taurus is right at home. It's also, it has, Venus, of course, rules two signs, right? Venus in Taurus is all about pleasure. They love, they love eating. Eating is the number one thing. They love earning money, not so much spending money, but they do. They know how to save up. Particularly with Venus, like Libra people, they know how to save up really well. Well, depending on the aspects of what other planets are aspected to Venus. Now, many of us, my generation, have Venus in an aspect to Neptune. So this is the generation of people who fall in love, like illusion love. It's like, oh, I want love. And so there's usually issues with that. Specifically if your Venus is square Neptune, I have that. My Neptune was in Sagittarius. Venus was in Virgo. So Venus in Taurus is like, it's all about pleasure. It's all about doing things very earthly things. Planting as well. Venus and Taurus people also they don't mind planting anything to do with the earth. Venus loves, Taurus loves music as well. Enjoys anything that's pleasing to the senses. It's all about the five senses. That's more of a Taurus thing, but yeah, it's also Venus. But anything pleasing, it's sensuality, not sexuality. Okay. Venus, there's also groundedness to Venus and Taurus, but that's about it. I can't think of anything else. Venus and Gemini people are very flirtatious. Going back to Taurus, Venus in Taurus loves to relate to people. It draws people into any sort of partnership that gives them pleasure. Any sort of things that give them pleasure. So people, pleasure, animals, things, anything that gives them pleasure, they will go for that. Most more than Gemini. Gemini people love communication, love to just blah, blah, blah. They just like to, not necessarily intellectualize. That's Venus. That's more like Venus in Aquarius. Also kind of in Libra. Venus and Gemini love to play games with people, with things. They love the adventure, the curiosity of life, the whole what is there to learn, what is there to earn, what is there to do. And I just burnt myself. I have to run in cold water. So Venus, let me see. So Venus and Gemini is like playing games. Venus is Venus is kind of So Venus doesn't like what's happening right now. It's not pleasing, but it has to happen, right? My mom has, I think, my mama has Venus in Scorpio. So, anyways, let's go back to Venus Gemini. Oh, so yeah, playing games, anything to do with curiosity, relating, things that kind of go back and forth. There's always some sort of like back and forth thing with Venus and Gemini. When I say back and forth, I mean like there's always a certain flow to thought and intellect. Again, not really to an intellectualized thing, but can be. Yeah. Uh, so with anything to do with pleasure, if I'm pleasuring games, uh, relating with each other, kind of that flirtatiousness is kind of like it's kind of like a seesaw sort of thing, right? And then Venus in this is a strong one. Venus in Cancer, they love being at home. They enjoy being at home, being secure with a partner, secure in things that they have, secure in knowing that there's always something for tomorrow. Secure also hoarding, probably. Venus in Cancer, people enjoy hoarding, collecting things, I would say. Probably also Taurus, because Taurus is all about security as well. But depends, like if it's an emotional attachment, there's some sort of nostalgia attached to it. Yeah, Venus in Cancer will collect things. It depends if it's in a strong aspect to, let's say, Neptune or something like that. Yeah, hoarding might be potential because I did that. I didn't say I did hoard, but it wasn't like that much. Well, I guess compared to my parents, but still, there was some hoarding. So, and I just like I woke up and was like, no, no more. Simplify, throw it away, because it just causes more. Like, it's more important to have things that you just have. Things are temporary, but if the person hasn't really woken up and noticed that their ability to appreciate things has nothing to do with the things itself and people and things outside of them, but more like internal. You know, Venus is can be internalized. Venus can be what is real pleasure. Is it really the temporary stuff, or is it more like your eternal stuff, like your eternal things, like your things that people cannot take away from you? That's Venus. So anything to do with having possession, that's Venus as well. Um, so Venus in Cancer is like that, but they have to watch out for those. Venus in Leo is just loves to be childlike, loves to also kind of similar to Gemini, where there's a playing sort of thing. They love to, they enjoy recreational stuff, dancing for sure, and definitely music, but really shining in that case, like really untethered, so to speak. It's a little freer because it is fire. It's like it's out there. Um, and Venus in Leo has to watch out for, of course, being, when they start to consider themselves like, why am I not the center of attention? Why are people forgetting me? Me. But the ego comes in, the sun, depending on what your sun is. If you have Venus, uh, if you have Venus in Leo, but also your sun is in Leo, that's a really strong, that can affect how, like if it's a square, or let's say it's Venus in Scorpio, but your sun is in Leo, that might cause a lot of like effect on, you start to become more like me, right? You can become egotistical. Okay. Let me see this. Venus, and then Venus in Virgo. That's what I have. Venus in Virgo is obviously, like I said earlier, it's in a detriment position, I think, because there's always a need for perfection instead of letting go and love, control, and trusting.